Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Indeed, my name is Mikko, and I hunt hackers. That's what I do. That's my job, hunting hackers. And when I say hunting hackers, I mean the bad hackers, the evil hackers, the criminal hackers, the ones who hack into our systems, who break our security, who write the malware, who run the botnets, who send the spam. Those guys. And I've been doing it for quite a while. In fact, last month, in September, I celebrated the 25th anniversary of the first virus I ever analyzed. Because in September 1991, on the 13th of September 1991, my boss gave me one of these. And he told me that, Mikko, try cracking it. I think there's a virus on it. And I spent 3 days going through these, well, not this exact floppy disk, but one of these floppy disks, trying to figure out if it was infected with an unknown virus or not. And it turned out to be infected with an unknown virus, a virus called Omega, which was the first virus I ever analyzed. And I remember that the date was 13th of September 1991, because in 1991, 13th of September is a Friday. And this particular virus was one of those destructive viruses which activated on Friday the 13th and then would overwrite computers which were infected by it. And obviously the game is totally different today. These old viruses back then in 1980s, 1990s were all written by teenage boys. And their motive for writing viruses was that they had no motive. They were doing it for no reason. They were gaining nothing by writing viruses or creating malware. They weren't making any money. They weren't becoming famous. They had no political motive. And when we look at where we are today, the changes could not have been bigger. Back then, analyzing viruses was sort of like a fun game where unknown attackers would try to create new viruses which we couldn't crack. And then we tried to crack them anyway. And then when we succeeded, we won. And then we were looking for the next piece of malware to analyze. But it's no longer a game. And it's no longer fun. This is not fun and games anymore. And if somebody would have told me in 1991 to where we would be 25 years later, I would not have believed any of it. I would not have believed that we would be fighting organized crime. Fighting organized crime, creating tens of millions, hundreds of millions of euros in profit for the organized crime by creating and distributing malware. I wouldn't have believed that. I would not have believed that we will start to see attacks from extremists and terrorists. And I would not have believed if someone would have told me 25 years ago that eventually we will be seeing governments themselves to become part of the problem. Governments, militaries, intelligence agencies using offensive hacking and using malware for their own purposes, for their purposes of doing intelligence gathering, spying, and doing surveillance. That would have been total science fiction. If somebody would have told me that eventually intelligence agencies like these guys, that's the NSA, that they would be looking at blanket surveillance of the whole planet, or that they would be deploying offensive malware attacks, even attacks against friendly partner nations, or that we would have to worry about things like US intelligence agencies targeting US companies with their own attacks in order to gain access to systems that they're interested in gaining access to. Because we now know that US intelligence agencies have tried breaching security of systems of companies like Microsoft and Cisco, which are US-based companies. So suddenly now, in this age of paranoia, As a tech company, your threat model no longer just includes foreign intelligence agencies. In some cases, you have to worry about your own intelligence agencies, which is a great example of the paranoid time where we are all living today and how quick this change has been. 25 years, quarter of a century, everything's changed. And I definitely did not sign up for this. When I started analyzing funny viruses spreading on floppy disks, I did not sign up to be fighting organized crime or extremists or foreign intelligence agencies. But that's exactly where we ended up with. That's where we are today. Now, governmental attacks, APT attacks, targeted attacks, governmental hacking, those are very, very serious cases when they hit you. But we have to remember that most companies are never hit with APT attacks or with governmental attacks. If your company, if your organization would not have been targeted by traditional spying before the internet, it probably isn't being targeted by governmental spying over the internet today. Companies that really are targeted are, governmental institutions, militaries, defense contractors, some high-tech companies, some internet operators. But most companies actually are not targeted by governmental attacks. And for those companies, the number one threat really isn't attacks from the NSA or from the GRU or from the PLA or from the North Koreans or Iranians. Their problem is much more practical. Their problems are guys like these. Criminals. Criminals whose motive is to make money. On a typical day at F-Secure Labs, we receive around 350,000 to 400,000 malware samples to be analyzed. Let's think about that for a moment. 400,000 samples every single day. And out of those samples, we estimate that 95% are coming from organized crime gangs. Almost all of it is coming from these guys. The remaining 5% is then split to governmental attacks, to hacktivists like Anonymous, and to extremists or leftovers. But the vast, vast majority is money-making malware. And for the average company, this is the most likely problem that they will run into. It's also interesting to note that for an average citizen, almost in any country today, it's now, in 2016, it's more likely that you become a victim of a crime online instead of the real world. If you are going to become a victim of a crime, it's most likely no longer happening in the real world. It's much more likely that you will become a victim in the online world. Yeah, somebody might steal your car or steal your wallet or burglar in your house. It happens. But it's much more likely that your computer or your tablet or your systems get breached by an exploit kit, or you get hit by a ransom Trojan or a banking Trojan or a keylogger. Happens all the time. Why is this? Because the internet has no borders. The internet has no geography. The internet has no distances. So internet has enabled all the criminals that could not reach you before the internet to reach you now. Before the internet, you only had to worry about the criminals in your city. Now you have to worry about criminals who could be anywhere on the planet. That's the difference. Internet is as if somebody would have given free plane tickets to all the criminals on the planet. Criminals who couldn't reach you before can now reach you. But don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that internet is bad and evil, because it's not. Internet is great. Internet is the best thing that has happened during our lifetime. I love the internet. Clearly, internet has brought us more good things than bad things. Yes, it has exposed us to new kinds of risks. It has exposed us to criminals who could not have reached us before the internet. But clearly, the upsides are much, much bigger than the downsides. Think about all the connectivity internet enabled, all the business, all the entertainment. When history books will be written hundreds of years from now, this time, the early 2000s, this time will be defined as the time when the mankind got online. And we, all of us, we're so lucky to be alive. during these defining years. But yes, we also have to worry about these guys. Here on the left, from Riga, Latvia, Denis Kalovskis, the brains behind the Gozi botnet. In the center, Viljar Kivi from Estonia, running fairly large-scale phishing attacks for many, many years. And both Denis and Viljar have been caught. They're both in jail right now. Unlike the guy on the right, Yevgeny Bogachev. He was running the Zeus botnet. Zeus, one of the largest banking Trojan networks we've seen over the last years. And Yevgeny is on the run. We don't know where he is. We have some evidence linking that he might be in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, but we don't actually know. Yevgeny is right now listed on the wanted pages of, for example, Europol and Interpol. And he's wanted for cybercrimes, and I'm guessing also for crimes against fashion. Like what the hell is that? Now, organized crime in the online world works surprisingly well with each other. They actually trade code, trade stolen data, trade stolen credit card numbers, trade stolen credentials, buy and sell stuff. It's an economy. It's an underground economy. Most of this is happening in the dark web, in the Tor hidden services, in forums running in Tor. But some of it is actually happening out in the open. In fact, if you go to YouTube and just search for services like booters, what you'll find is YouTube ads advertising denial of service botnets. Advertising services where you or anybody can go and buy a service to launch a denial of service attack against any website or any email server or any other kind of server. Let me show you one of these ads. Now, this is not actually an endorsement. I'm not suggesting you to go and buy an attack from that site, because that would actually be illegal. But this is how they advertise. This is how it works. And we keep running into the same old problems year after year. Like we used to be fighting macroviruses in the 1990s. We're still fighting them today. They're coming back. We've been fighting problems with passwords for, I don't know, since 1980s. Like, how is it possible that passwords are still a problem in 2016? How come we're unable to fix such a basic problem? But it is a problem, very real problem, like we saw this summer with the LinkedIn breach, which actually happened in 2012, but was made public only this summer, a couple of months ago. And we learned of users who were using bad passwords and using the same bad password on all services. And you don't have to be stupid to do that. Because, for example, one person who was caught in the LinkedIn breach was Mark Zuckerberg, the guy who runs Facebook, who's obviously not stupid. But his password on LinkedIn was da. And he used the same password everywhere, including all other social media sites, not on Facebook, but everywhere else, which means his Twitter account and Tumblr account and other accounts were taken over by attackers who were just looking for his email address in the LinkedIn dump and using the same password to different services. And you know what? I was one of the victims of the LinkedIn breach because I had an account with LinkedIn in 2012. I did have a unique password because I use a password manager. And actually I had changed the password since 2012, so nothing happened. But I was one of the victims. And as soon as the dump became public, I knew I was a victim. How did I know? Because I got an email, not from LinkedIn. I got an email from a friend of mine, from a guy called Troy Hunt, who runs a service called Have I Been Pwned? And this is a service where you can register with your email address or all the email addresses you use. And then if there's a dump of stolen credentials from any server, from any system, and your email address is in the dump, they will send you a notification. And this is the notification I got from Have I Been Pwned. And this is a service I recommend to all of you. You can register your email addresses, and if they become pwned, you will get a notification. And it's actually a trustworthy service. I know the guy who runs it. It is legitimate. So, Have I Been Pwned? An easy way to find it on Google is that you go to Google and just type Have I Been and then anything, and Google will find the site for you. That's how you find it. So passwords, surprisingly, still a problem in 2016. And you don't have to take that from me. You can take that from the President of the United States.
And more companies are moving to new, stronger technologies to authenticate user identities, like biometrics. Because it's just too easy for hackers to figure out user names and passwords like password or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Those are some of my previous passwords. I've changed them since then.
So we can basically divide all the problems we have in computer security in two different groups. We have group number 1, vulnerabilities. Basically bugs in the code. And we fix vulnerabilities by fixing the bugs and then making sure that everybody updates. But then we have group number 2, and that's user error. Users doing stupid stuff. And we can't fix that by patching. There's no update for that. And users are doing stupid stuff. Stuff like, I don't know, taking photos of their credit cards and then posting them to Twitter. And then, when somebody asks her that, hey, that's a nice card, what's the number on the other side? I quit. You can't patch that. There's no patch for stupidity. And when users make mistakes, when users click on links, when users forget to update their system, when users click enable content in the Word document they just received as an attachment, then they end up getting owned. Typically, on their Windows systems, they end up getting infected. And today, when you get infected, it's likely that you're getting infected with something like this. This is DMA locker. DMA locker, a prime example of ransom Trojans. And ransom Trojans, especially on Windows platform, have become the biggest problem we're fighting. And this is a different problem than, banking Trojans or keyloggers, or that your computer becomes part of the botnet. Because if you have a keylogger on your system, yeah, it's bad because now somebody's getting your credit card numbers and your passwords, but you can still, your computer still works. Or if you become part of the botnet, your computer might be launching denial of service attacks against someone else, or it might be, sending spam. But that doesn't really hurt you. You can still, carry on working, ignorant of the problems you're causing to other people. But when this happens, your work stops. You can't do anything. Your computer is locked. And even worse, when this happens in an enterprise, it's not just the single user's laptop which gets encrypted. What typically happens is that one employee has an infection on his laptop, and it happens at, airport lounge or at the hotel, and then he carries the infected laptop back to the company headquarters and plugs it into the corporate network. And then overnight, it's going to encrypt the laptop. It's going to mount every single share that the user can mount, and it's going to encrypt every single file that the user has write access to. That's one of the unique problem with ransomware. They don't require elevated privileges. They don't have to become an administrator or root. It's fine that they only have user privileges because what they want to do is to encrypt the user's files. And now we can all take a moment and think about how large access do we have to shares in our network and how many files we could write to. And you would think that today all companies could recover from ransom Trojans like these by simply recovering backups. And you would be wrong. We know, because we regularly work with companies, even large enterprises which have been hit with ransom Trojans, which can't do it. For some reason, backups failed, or they're too old, or they didn't cover everything, or they're just too slow to restore, so they would rather pay the ransom. We even know of large companies which have prepared themselves for this, and they have prepared Bitcoin wallets with Bitcoins ready to be paid off for the off chance that one of their employees gets hit with the ransom Trojan. And this just feeds the problem, because the more users and more companies pay the ransom, the bigger the problem is. And we are already tracking 110 different ransom Trojan gangs. 110 different gangs making all of their money with ransom Trojans. And by the way, not all of the gangs are from Russia. Some of them are from Ukraine. And this has become such a big business that we are already now seeing ransom Trojan gangs which are stepping one step beyond. They are moving from traditional ransom Trojans to ransom Trojans as a service. This is the Shark ransomware project. This is a ransomware franchise with a revenue share with the partners. So these guys develop the actual ransom Trojan, the encryption part and the payment backends, but they don't infect anybody, because that's risky and it's also illegal. So they outsource the riskiest part of the operation to their partners, then they do a revenue share of the bitcoins that people pay. And the megatrend that made all of this possible is Bitcoin. Now that doesn't mean that Bitcoin is bad, because Bitcoin isn't bad. Bitcoin is a tool, just like real-world cash is a tool. But it is the enabler, which means that these attackers can move the money without getting caught. And in almost always, the ransom Trojan authors will deliver. If you pay the ransom, they will decrypt your files. They will even provide support for you if you have trouble doing it. Because these guys need a good reputation. They need a good reputation so future victims will pay as well. And we've actually even tried it. We've infected our test systems, and then we've went to their chat support to talk to these guys. And we try to haggle the price. Can we get it down? They want 3 bitcoins and we're offering 1.5. Let's see. Almost all it works. Almost always they will lower the price if you try haggling, which is interesting. So if you get hit with a ransom Trojan and you don't have backups, no, haggle. Try to make it lower. Almost. We tried it with many, many different gangs. 90% of them dropped the price after negotiations. Of course, they believed that we were a real victim. And we had these sob stories about how we don't have the money, please, please. And they would drop the price. So nice guys, you know. Another revolution which is underway, in addition of the blockchain revolution, is the IoT revolution. IoT and ICS, Internet of Things, Industrial Control Systems. And the IoT revolution will happen whether we are part of it or not. Now what I mean by that is eventually all devices will be online, and they won't always be online to benefit the user of the appliance. In many cases they will be online to benefit the manufacturer. So if you go today and you buy a washing machine, many of the models you will be offered will be IoT washing machines, which for example means that when your clothes are clean, you will get a push message to your phone, which is probably useful, at least a little bit useful. But in the future, you go and buy a toaster. It's most likely going to be an IoT toaster, but there's no benefit for you. I mean, there's no display, there's no features, you don't get a push message that the toast is done. But it's still going to be online. Why? Because it's going to be contacting back to the manufacturer to provide analytics. and usage information and failure reports, which is valuable to the manufacturer. It's not valuable to you, it's valuable to them. And this is going to happen because IoT chips and connectivity chips are becoming so cheap that the benefits don't have to be very large at all. Everything will be online. And the risk in IoT devices is not that somebody's going to hack your fridge or somebody's going to hack your toaster. I mean, people think about that and they ignore it. I mean, if somebody hacks my toaster, I don't care. It's a goddamn toaster, right? That's not the point. The point is that these devices will open up a vector for the attacker to gain access to the network behind the device. So for example, last month we found IoT light bulbs which had a remote vulnerability which opened up the door to the network behind the light bulbs. This is the risk. These are the weakest chains in our network. Another risk in IoT, last week, 2 weeks ago, we saw the largest denial of service attack in the history of the internet. Launched from a botnet which had millions of bots. And those bots were not running on computers. They were running on smart TVs and security cameras and set-top boxes. It was an IoT botnet. And that created the largest denial of service attack in the history of the internet. And we hear a lot about things like car hacking. Car hacking has been in the headlines for the last 2 years for a good reason. But people typically worry about the wrong thing. They worry about, oh my God, an evil hacker is going to hack my car when I'm driving on the highway and they're going to disable my brakes and they're going to drive me off a cliff and they will kill me. No, they won't. That's not going to happen. Hackers are not interested in killing random people. It's also illegal to kill random people. A much more realistic risk of car hacking is something that you can see in this security camera footage. A guy breaks into a Jeep, and instead of starting to hotwire the car, he takes out a MacBook. And he connects his MacBook to the ODP channel of the car and starts hacking away. After 4 minutes, the alarm goes off. After 2 more minutes, he starts the car, drives away. This is car hacking. And here, the hacker benefits. He just stole a car without breaking the windows. So we have to think about the motives. Like, why would somebody do something? And that also applies to governmental hacking. Especially from the point of view of the militaries, offensive cyber operations make a lot of sense. Cyber arms are effective, affordable, and deniable. Effective, affordable, and deniable. That's a great combination in any weapon. And that's the reason why we are seeing an arms race. We are now in the middle of an arms race. We're just seeing the beginning of the next big arms race. It's going to be the cyber arms race. We just got out of the last arms race, which was the nuclear arms race. And we're now jumping headlong into the next arms race, which is cyber arms race. So we see foreign governments and foreign intelligence agencies and foreign militaries use these tools all the time. We see attacks coming from the Chinese, from the Russians, coming from North Korea, coming from Iran. And of course, Russia has been especially active over the last couple of months, targeting targets in the United States. And I don't believe that the end game of the Russian government is trying to get Trump elected. I don't believe in that. What I think they're trying to do, what I think their end game is just to make USA weaker as a nation. So in a month, when the elections are over, and we have a winner, we have the next president in the United States, what Russia is probably trying to do is to make sure that the loser and his or her supporters will believe that somehow the other party won through some cheating or by some hacking. So they will not accept the result, which creates a very divided country, a country which is very hard to lead, making USA weaker as a whole. That's what I believe is the end game of the Russians with the attack they've done so far, which included hacking different party servers and leaking emails. We just saw the last email leak last night. It's happening over and over again. And the FBI has confirmed that at least in 20 different states in USA, there's been attacks against the election systems themselves. This is what's happening right now. This is what is going on. So when the internet came around, let's say when the web came around in early 1990s, for quite a while, for many, many years, it felt like we were living in some kind of utopia. Internet utopia. One world. No borders, no countries, no geographies. That's what it felt like. Well, that utopia wasn't real. The borders never went away. They're still very much there. And countries are more active with offensive attacks on the internet than ever before. And one way to fight back is through open source. To make sure that the systems we use are trustworthy and can be verified by anybody. Relying on open source to bring us trustworthy privacy and trustworthy security is a crucial point for our future on the internet. The utopia has gone, it's not coming back. But we can do what we can to maintain as much trust on the internet as possible. And openness is key to trust. Without openness, there's no trust. Without trust, there is no democracy. So in the open source world, we speak a lot about free. Free and freedom. And of course, free, there's different kinds of free. But the fact is that almost everything that you're being offered on the internet today for free isn't free. There is no free lunch. Or here's a free lunch. Google is offering us free services, free email, free search, free office applications, free cloud storage. You use these services and you pay nothing. You would think that a company that offers you such a good selection of services, and the services are great, they really are very well designed. You would think that a company which is investing so much money into their infrastructure and so much money into their resources, but charging nothing, you would think that a company like that would go bankrupt. But Google is not going bankrupt. Google made 80 billion in revenues last year, 95% of which came from the free services, which nicely illustrates just how valuable our data is. And we already have a generation of young people who don't remember the time before the internet. You go and speak to 20-year-olds and they don't remember the time before Google or before Wikipedia. For them, the net has always been there. And for them, it's always been natural that they pay for content, not with money, but with their privacy. And that's a bit sad. And that is the reality of the world where we live in. Gladly, there are some free things on the internet which really and truly are free, like free and open source products. And that's the thing that gives me hope. So thank you for working together for a more free and more open future for the internet for all of us. Thank you very much.